Well, it's Winnebago time again. So I'm just going to start with what's new in here first. There is the wideband air fuel gauge. Blasted a hole in the dash. We're still messing with the wiring a bit here. It's why it's kind of untidy. There is the tack module I was talking about that is required for the drive-by-wire pedal. The fuel line is run. More on that later. And the engine is wired. We pretty much mocked up, but it's pretty close to being done. Here is the relay panel for the standalone harness. I think I showed you in the other video, it's a PSI conversion harness. Here is the old voltage regulator, ignition box, and ballast resistor that is no longer used. But we were testing wires to see what was hot and what wasn't, because we need a wire which gives us power when the key's on, obviously, to power up the computer and ignition and all that. But we also needed a wire that gave power while it was cranking. And believe it or not, there's not one wire that does both. So we had to find the wire that did each, both of which went to that ballast resistor for the ignition, and everything's good. The fuel system's plumbed. There's the Warbarrel 255 pump. Here's the fittings going into the sump we had. Up here, that is a Corvette fuel filter, which has a built-in fuel pressure regulator. So that other line coming off is actually the return line coming off the high pressure line from the pump. So when we have one line going to the motor, it's a returnless system. This other hose here is going over to the other tank, on which there was a drain plug, which wasn't on the main tank. And we ran the hose into the bottom of that, so now actually both tanks will share fuel, the auto level. So that gives us roughly like 70 gallons of fuel capacity. Here's where the batteries live. There was a regular car battery like this, and then this monster. We ran new cables. I have this connected right now, but this goes all the way up front here, so I'll show you in a bit. And then ground cable goes back to the frame. There's still this nonsense in here which I currently have all unhooked because it's a complete disaster. There's battery cables and all kind of bundles of wire. You can see it back there. Don't know what they were intending here, but you can see it's well wired. I'll show you what's underneath. That battery cable we ran to the factory Dodge starter relay. That's your relay, not a solenoid on these. And you can see it just kind of goes onto itself there. And then it goes underneath the oil pan. Then over the starter where I'll show you. This will be tidied up more. We're just kind of testing everything out. And then that yellow wire is the starter solenoid trigger wire, which comes off this relay. And actually then, goes to the starter solenoid and triggers it to start. And then there's where it ends up. There is the starter cable, the alternator charge wire, and the solenoid wire all go in the starter. And the accessory drive is all on. And the charging wire goes to the alternator there. Let's see what else. The return line is ran from the turbo and heat sleeved. I don't know, pretty much it. The motor's complete. It's actually ready to start as soon as Corey's brother gets here with a fresh computer that he has will unlock the anti-theft on, and then we're going to try and start it up, load it on a bass tune, and see what happens.
Trashed right now. I don't think it'll trash it. It's not like we filled the cylinders with water.
It stopped pumping.
There you go. I turned it on. Now
Oh.
I'm scanning.
Wow.
Yeah, that's garbage.
So that's why it wouldn't run. That's the fuel that was in the tank. Look at this.
Holy shit. Well, can't tune that out. Now it smells like gas.
Yeah. Well, that's an improvement.
Fuel. Add more gas. Add more fuel.
Add like 10 times more.
I added 20% that time.
That blew out. Red dot.
Oh, it's from the turbo. It's like a flooded quadrijet.
Almost.
You want to brake clean it a little bit again? I wouldn't do that.
No. It smells like raw fuel now.
Maybe it's flooded.
Hold it wide open.
You can hold it wide open and try to flip it. Listen.
It's like starting a grimy carburetor.
Hold it till the rods come out.
Yeah, so I don't feel like doing it. I'm working on shit.
Take a pinch back out.
Change the jets.
Yeah, that'd be easier.
There we go.
What a frame rail fought. I'm gonna have to put something across that. Like,
There's another cross member that goes in front. Well, okay, all the excitement's over. I didn't really explain much when it was happening, but what was happening was, well, first of all, the gas in the tank, the gas that was in the reserve tank went from our little hose into the main tank and kind of like balanced out, even though we drained all the fuel from the main tank, and that was like half water, so it wasn't running on that. We put fresh gas in it, and it was when it was kind of like bucking and carrying on. For some reason, the tune got screwed up, so he started over from scratch and just wiped everything again. And for some reason, when he did that and then put everything back to the way it should have been, it started and ran. Currently, it's still running a bit rough because the intake air temperature is reading negative 31 degrees. So there is no intake air temperature sensor right now. It's built into the mass airflow, which we aren't using. So we're either going to plumb one in, or he's going to put a resistor in the wire. But right now, as soon as it starts, it's killing all the fuel due to that intake air temperature not reading right. So next up is we're going to fix that, hopefully. And we got to put the cooling system in. There's another big cross member that goes here in the radiator. And then we're gonna work on the air conditioning next. So yeah, important update. It actually runs.